ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Indian Nation Station pregame show here live from Alexander Stadium at Perk Field. I'm AJ Ganger with Bob Luby, Dwayne Bachman, back here for another home game on this three-game homestand for the Piqua Indians before they go 2 on the road after tonight's game. Guys, don't forget that on Monday nights at 5:30 p.m., the full telecast of this game here tonight can be viewed on Channel 5. It'll also be up very late on Sunday night on our YouTube page. So don't forget to go and check all that out. Well, guys, another week, another home game. Are you guys getting tired yet?
Oh, no. I just wonder why the season has gone so quickly. My golly. Next week, we're at the halfway mark.
I know. Bob, what about you?
Hey, I love football, so football can never go deep enough into the year for me. And home games, of course, it's fun. It's special. Yep. Football's always been special in Piqua, and when you're out here in the stadium and have an opportunity to be in a beautiful venue like this, what can be better?
I have to 100% agree with you guys. Let's take a look at the Indians' remaining schedule. Speaking of home games, including tonight, we have 4 more home games, a very rare 6 home game, 4 road game year for the Indians. Take on Fairborn tonight. Then we've got a road game against Trotwood next week. The big one, the battle for the battered helmet on the 28th at Sydney. On October the 5th, it's homecoming as the Greenville Green Wave comes into town to take on the Indians. On October the 12th, we are at Butler. We close out the year on the 19th against Tip City and the 26th against Troy. Guys, we're starting to get into the meat and potatoes, if you will, of our schedule. 2 crossover games and then a bunch of American North games.
Well, I think as you look at the schedule, it all boils down to what we said before the first game. It's all going to come down to G-Walk North, and so far we haven't made too many inroads in that. We're going to start on that tonight. It's all going to come down to Fairborn, Sydney, Greenville, Butler, and Tip City, and Troy. It's a little early to make any predictions, but those are the teams that make up the division. Those are the teams that you're going to have to beat.
Hard to disagree with that. That's why we're in a league, and you have to win your league games if you want to compete at a high level, and also if you want to be in contention for a playoff berth.
I agree, and I think it's going to be huge once we start getting into the last 5 games of the season with our American North people to see who this Indians team really is. We've really had a couple tough games, and then the Meadowdale game last week was kind of a runaway. But these guys were prepared. I was surprised that they didn't take Meadowdale for granted. They came out. Bill Neese had these kids coached as if they were getting ready to play CJ again, and they played very well. And I think, besides the CJ game, the first half of the CJ game, I really think they played pretty strong football as well.
They have, and AJ, you talk about taking something for granted. I still have enough of the old coach left in me that as a coach and or a player, you never take anything for granted.
No.
You prepare for the supposed worst team on your schedule the way you would for a good football team. You have to, because it doesn't take much for things to go south for a team in any sport. And you have to be ready. So again, Piqua's going to come out tonight and be ready to get after people to prepare themselves for the future games that we know are going to be more challenging.
Well, I think we got to be careful, just like Bob says. 0-3 by Fairborn. We don't know exactly what that means, but you can't take any of them for granted. But this would be one where if you let your guard down, they could sneak up and bite you. I wouldn't anticipate it, but I really believe that, you said it right, AJ. Our kids are playing pretty good football against some decent opposition.
All right, guys, now let's move into the scores from last week around the G-Walk. Some notable: Sydney beating Dayton Belmont 38-6. Troy with a huge win over Turpin 29-7. Butler ended up beating Wilmington, which was close for, 3.5 quarters, 38-12 as they ran away with that one. West Carrollton got a win, 47-42. Springfield ended up beating Hudson 16-10. Xenia beat Franklin 35-26. Wayne got beat by Archbishop Hoban 47-28. Northmont ran away against Tip City 35-14. Beaver Creek a 57-19 win over Fairborn. Pinkerton Central ran over Troutwood 42-19. Alter beat Centerville 10-7 in a defensive old school game, as well as that Lebanon and West Claremont game, a 7-3 game. CJ ended up beating Greenville on Thursday night. We talked about that last week on the pregame show. Guys, what are your thoughts from the scores around the GWalk in Week 3?
Well, the one that didn't surprise me is Pickerington Central over Trotwood Madison.
Yeah.
We know what Pickerington Central is all about. They've got 2 or 3 high schools. They've been very, very good. That one didn't surprise me. I think 42-19 was a little more of a spread than I would have guessed. But Pickerington Central, they are good, and they will continue to be good throughout the season and probably in the playoffs.
I'll tell you, I looked at that Alter Centerville game and score. And when was the last time you can remember Centerville starting off the year 0-3?
Never. It's hard to look back at that.
It is. I'm not sure. I know I heard at one point in time they were playing a freshman quarterback.
Wow.
Now, I'm sure he's a good athlete, but anytime you play a freshman quarterback, he's going to play like a freshman.
Yeah, he is.
For whatever reason. And that might be somewhat of a problem for them. But, boy, Centerville typically is in the playoffs. They're 0-3, and let me see. Tonight
I think tonight, Bob, they're going to play 3-0 Springfield.
Yeah.
Oh my.
So Springfield's a good football team.
Yes.
Now, if Centerville goes 0-4, their chances of making the playoffs are slim and none.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the folks in Centerville aren't used to that. They're just not ready, not prepared to have a start like that, nor are they prepared to sit out the playoffs, to go to watch Alter or somebody else play in their region. So tough week for Centerville, I think.
Well, guys, like you said, the Centerville Alter game for me, was a shocker. Springfield playing a close game against Hudson, and like you said, Springfield's a good football team. Troy beating Turpin. Is Troy for real this year, guys, you think?
Oh, I really believe that if you had to look at the Division North schools in the GWalk, you'd have to put Troy at the top. I don't think there's any question about it. How much at the top, that has yet to be decided. But when you look at all of the schools, Troy, I think, without a doubt, has to be number 1.
Troy's a good football team, well coached, has some talent. You put those two together, and you get yourself a pretty good football team. So, yeah, it does not surprise me. I'm a little surprised with Trotwood, but then I look at the schedule and I see they play a Simeon team out of Chicago, I guess, who's very talented. They play a Pickerington Central, who I think maybe is number 1 in the big school division in the state.
Sure, they really are.
Their schedule has been somewhat. Then they opened with Winton Woods.
Yep.
And Winton Woods is always a real good football program. So they didn't start off with any soft patsies with their schedule. Now they'll get into league schedule. I know we'll talk about this a little later. Trotwood's game this week, and that'll be with Sydney.
All right, guys, so let's transition now. We did get the Division III rankings in Region 12 right before we went on the air tonight. The top 8 teams listed on this list will actually, if the season were to end today, would be into the playoffs, and then the bottom teams would have to be fighting or they'd be completely out. And pick was Division III, Region number 12 right now. At number 1, we've got CJ. No surprise there, I would have to say. Number 2, Walpock. Number 3, Carroll. Number 4, Baden. Number 5, Bishop Fenwick. Number 6, our Piqua Indians. Number 7, Salina. And number 8, Butler. Down at the bottom, we've got number 9, Archbishop Alter. Number 10, Ross. Number 11, Greenville. Number 12, Hughes. Number 13, Trotwood. 14, Tip City. And 15, Mount Healthy. That is your rankings as of right now on Joel Elite. Unofficial, obviously, but right now, if the season were to end today, guys, Piqua would be in the playoffs. Good news.
I think number 8, Vandalia Butler, is also one that we can't take for granted, even though they struggle a little bit. If you're number 8 after this early in the season, I tend to think we have to pay a little attention to that.
Unfortunately, that's not the way the rankings are going to end.
No.
That's where we are today. We got a long road to travel. I think one thing that I feel really it bothers me is the fact that Piqua may not get much help from the teams it has beaten thus far.
Meadowdale, Fairborn, they're not. I mean, Meadowdale, Lima Senior.
I'm not sure. Lima's won one game, I think, up to this point. Meadowdale beat a club team, which they get no points for. Let me see who else we have in there.
We've got 2 wins right now, so.
Yeah.
Tonight would be a 3rd win if we were to get one tonight.
Well, we're not going to get any computer points from CJ. You have to win to get computer points.
Right.
So we're not doing too badly, probably, when you look at who we've played. But there's a long way to go, just as Bob said. I wouldn't be a bit surprised, and I'm going to keep this list. And I just wonder how many of these 15 will be amongst the 15 as we sit here before the Troy game. I would guess, generally speaking, this is going to be the list, but not in this order.
And, you look at it, too. Obviously, 1 would play 8, 2 would play 7. Carroll would end up playing us in the first game as a 3 versus 6 matchup, and we would be on the road for that game, too. So that would be a really, really tough game for us going into Carroll to play that game as well.
So when all's said and done, it's as we look at the rest of Piqua's schedule, it's critical for the Indians to beat some of the teams in our American North Division and the teams that have won a few so we can get some of those secondary points. Because if we're relying strictly on beating a team that is not a good performer, we're going to be in trouble.
You look at we'll get into the standings here in just a little bit. When you look at the standings right now, the GWalk American North this season is very strong. One team in there only has 1 loss. That's Tip City or 1 win. That's Tip City. Everybody else 2-1, and they only have the 3-1 or 3-0 team at Troy. So I mean, the American North very, very strong this season, I would have to say.
But you know what happens, AJ? Now you get into a conference schedule. We're going to start knocking off each other.
Everybody's going to be beating up on everybody.
Somebody's going to lose, and that's what happens when you're in conferences. But that's the way it's set up.
Yes,
I don't want to put either Bob or AJ on the at any disadvantage, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. I tend to think if Piqua has a chance at the playoffs, they've got to beat either Trotwood, Madison, or Troy. Agree or disagree?
It makes sense. I think that's the case. I'm not sure. I think Troy or Trotwood, we're going to find out a little more about them tonight. They're playing Sydney. How do they stack up against Sydney?
Yeah.
Sydney, they say, is a pretty good football team, has some athletes and so on. Trotwood has, with their record of what, 1-3, 1-2, 1-2, and again, tough schedule. I think Trotwood's better than that 1-2 record just based on the people they played.
Yeah.
So I think Trotwood will go up and beat Sydney. I just had that feeling. So. Yeah, again, I think Trotwood, of course, we have Trotwood next week. I think Trotwood's a good football team, and I think they're going to get better as the year progresses.
Well, guys, let's go ahead and transition to last week's game. Let's go through it pretty quickly. It was a blowout. Piqua beat Meadowdale by the score 42-0. There was a running clock very early in the second half. The offense and defense, in my mind, they both were in complete command the entire ball game. Special teams had a few issues that need to fix to win more of the field position battle, I think, when it comes to punting, kicking off, and obviously those extra points, missing those, not getting those, they could be key in a huge ball game like a game against a Sydney, Trotwood, Troy. Penalties, also, those continue to be kind of an issue. Holding, blocking the backs, things of that nature. The Indians, obviously, they look like they are continuing to improve, though, each week as we move in to the GWalk play. Micah Karn last week, Piqua only threw the ball 3 times. He was 1 of 3, 20 yards, and that one pass ended up being a touchdown. He ran the ball 7 times for 107 yards on 2 touchdowns, and he also had an INT on defense. McKeegan Kuhn was 7 rushes, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. Colin Rowe had 4 carries for 59 yards. Matt Blankenship with the 1 catch for a touchdown. Grant Toops and Lance Reeves both had 6 tackles on defense. Guys, quickly, your final thoughts on on the stats from last week's game.
Well, I think it's obvious. There's no sense passing the ball if you've got the running core that Piqua's got, and if you only have to pass 3 times, that means you're in command of the offense. And when you look at Kuhn, you look at Rowe, you look at Blankenship, there's no sense passing the ball where 2 out of the 3 things can happen are bad. You keep the ball on the ground with these runners. They're hard to beat. I'm wondering how they'll do tonight. I'm predicting another good evening for the running backs of Piqua High School. I tend to think we're going to be impressed with the number of yards that that group's going to put on the board.
I agree with you, Dwayne, in terms of our ability to run the football. Our offensive line has performed magnificently.
Yeah.
And that's why our running game has been so good.
Right.
We've dominated everybody at the line of scrimmage. However, that's going to get a little more difficult as we progress into our schedule.
You see more of the blitz packages and things like that, too.
You're going to see just better football players,
Right.
I think. Up front, you're going to see some defenses where they're going to be harder to block. They're going to put a lot of pressure on our run game, and then you have to be able to throw the football.
Yep.
That was always the knock against Troy in the past years. They ran this wing tee, and they were a running football team. But as they moved into the schedule, moved into the playoffs, they had a difficult time because they couldn't throw the football.
Yeah.
And the teams they were playing were better run defenders. They took them out of their running game. So as a result, you have to have a passing game. And I think in order to have a good passing game, you have to be able to do it and perform and display that sometimes. So,
Bob, have you had a chance to look at any of the stats on that very portion of Troy's offense? I have not. I don't know if they've thrown the ball a lot, if they've had to, but you're right. A couple years ago, they didn't have a running game, and they were very, very vulnerable. But I think you're right. They get that running game going, that passing game going, they're going to be awful hard to handle.
yeah, being a one-dimension team, unless you're awfully good and being one-dimensional running the football, unless you're really, really good at it, you're going to run into some people further down the line you get are going to shut that down.
Yeah.
Or slow it down. Let's put it that way, slow it down.
Yeah.
Well, again, I always said we got to look at the turnovers. I don't know if you've mentioned it or not, but we had 2 turnovers last Friday night against Meadowdale. Those numbers are significant, might be significant by the time this is over. Meadowdale had 3. That was of no surprise, simply because of the way they played.
I have a concern.
We had 2 turnovers, though, last week, too.
Yeah.
I have a concern, and that's with our kicking game,
Right.
especially not the punting. I think Micah Carr does a good job punting the football.
Yeah.
Mine is that extra point situation, and luckily we have not had any close games up to this point. When we get into a close game, that extra point kick, that 1 point might make the difference between a win, loss, or a tie. And you have to fine-tune that and get that down a little better. To me, it's not the fact it's a missed kick, even though we did miss one. It's the snap-hold phase of the extra point that has really been bothersome to us.
Maybe, AJ, you can tell us answer this question. How many field goals have we attempted in the first 3 games? To my knowledge, none.
We haven't attempted a single field goal. All of our field goals have come by way of extra points.
Yeah, well.
But you cannot tie in high school football. This isn't the Brown-Steelers game.
True.
My Brownies say they snapped their losing streak, though.
Well, they did. I know I know overtime, but I'm saying going.
Exactly. I know exactly what you're saying.
The extra point thing is a concern.
And
Bob mentioned it to Rick Krejci in the postgame last Friday. There's no doubt.
Krejci's over there off camera shaking his head. I don't know what you're talking about.
We talked a little bit about it. He indicated that they work on it all the time. They've got all the people in place, but it has been just a little shaky.
I think it's a snap issue. When I'm down here on the field, with my camera getting some shots, and I see the extra points, it's not as much as the snap's a bad snap. It's when it gets to the holder's mishandling it. it's like it's hitting off his fingertips, or he's looking away for a second. He's anticipating putting the ball on the tee before he actually catches the ball and puts it on the tee. So it almost to me looks like a mental thing.
It's not a snap issue then.
No, I don't think it's a snap issue.
It's the handling the football. And again, that just comes with confidence. There's some pressure on that.
Yeah.
There is some pressure, and you have to do it enough and repetition until it's almost automatic.
Yeah, I agree.
And as we look at football at Piqua High School over the last 2 or 3 years, 1 or 2 extra points would have made a difference in a couple cases. So the extra point situation has got to be rectified.
Yeah, I mean, you look at last year's Sydney game.
Sure.
I think they missed an extra point, and they ended up having to go. They went for 2 there at the end. If they would have made that extra point, they would have never have had to gone for 2.
Right.
All right, let's transition out of last week's game into this week's games around the G-Walk. Guys, it's G-Walk season. Everyone's playing. Everyone that's at least in the conference, they could be crossover games. We got Troy at Stebbins, Butler against Northmont, Greenville at Xenia, Sydney against Trotwood, Tip City at West Carrollton, Springfield at Centerville, Fairmont at Springboro, Wayne at Miamisburg, Beaver Creek at Lebanon, and our game here tonight, Piqua and Fairborn.
Let me say up front right away, I'm going to take Northmont over Butler.
Yeah, I'm going to take Northmont too. Big
you know
time.
Why?
Because they played last night.
And they won.
And they won 43-16.
All right. I just wanted to be sure you were on top.
Yeah,
What was that score, Bob?
It was 43-16. Northmont dominated.
I predict Northmont goes 9-1 or 10-0.
Yeah, because Wayne is not a strong football team.
I predict Northmont beats Wayne.
Yeah, I do too. I'm not sure anybody else on the schedule will beat Northmont unless they have a complete collapse.
I think you're right, Bob.
Any other games here quickly? Obviously Sydney Trotwood. We look at that game. That's going to be a huge game because we play Trotwood next week.
Yeah, as I said, I think this will be a measuring stick, a barometer for Sydney. It's going to tell them what kind of football team they have. And I think Trotwood will come ready to play. And I think Trotwood will win the football game.
And again, JJ, I'm looking at Greenville at Xenia, both 2-1. We thought that Greenville was a little better than maybe they appear to be. Xenia's 2-1. I would imagine if Greenville can beat Xenia tonight, we have to reestablish our thoughts about that ball club. I don't know anything about Xenia, but that's one I'm going to watch.
Xenia's a really good football team. They lost the one game. Obviously, they lost to Troy. Troy's a good football team.
Oh.
When you look at Xenia over the past few years, they were down, and now they're starting to get back to a point where Xenia can be a really good football team as we move into the MVL or the MLV next year, or the Miami Valley League, the MVL. They're going to give people a run for their money. I really think if Greenville does end up beating Xenia, it'll probably be, Xenia turned the ball over 5 times, or Greenville is just the real deal.
If I had to make a prediction, I'll predict that Xenia is going to edge Greenville tonight.
Yeah.
Just a prediction. Don't know anything about Xenia, but Greenville to me is vulnerable.
I agree with you, Dwayne. I think also Miamisburg will find out tonight how good they are. They're 3-0, but they're going to play Wayne. And Wayne, even though they're not as good as they've been in the past, I still think they have a pretty good collection of football players down there.
All right, guys. You know what my big bold prediction is? Centerville gets their first win tonight, beating Springfield at home. That's my prediction.
Okay.
Let's remember that
for 4 points.
Let's remember that for the next time we go on the air, because
Bob's grabbing
any way you look at it,
right now.
that's upset my judgment. Let's see whether AJ knows what he's talking about, and I have my doubts on that one.
If it happens, you're buying me a milkshake.
I'll do that.
I'll buy you one,
and
too.
if it doesn't
Two
happen,
milkshakes.
2 milkshakes.
yeah.
All right, guys, let's look here at the American North standings. Troy in first, Butler, Greenville, Piqua, and Sydney all behind them. Tip City down at the bottom. Obviously, it's too early to tell as we have 2 weeks of crossover games before we get into North action. Guys, what do you make of the American North standings at this time?
I would pick Tip City to become a little more competitive and move a little bit up in the standings. Other than that, I'm not so sure that I'm able to make very many predictions. I think, as Bob said earlier, we've got teams that are going to have to beat each other, and when that happens, these standings can be what they're supposed to be. Just guesses.
I think we need a couple more games to get a feel for how strong some of our teams are. We've all been playing out conference opponents, and it's hard to measure, I think.
Yes.
Just hard to measure.
All right, guys, now it's time to talk about the game taking place right here tonight, Alexander Stadium, Perk Field. It'll be the last home game on this 3-week homestand before the Indians go on the road for the next 2. Tonight, the Skyhawks of Fairborn come into town on a 3-game losing streak. They finally scored some points last week after being shut out in their first 2 games of the season against Tecumseh and Bellbrook. Even though they were able to put points up on the board last week, they were still blown out 57-19 against Beaver Creek. Meanwhile, the Piqua Indians are clicking on all cylinders as they're looking to win their 3rd straight game in a row and stay unbeaten at home this season. Gentlemen, what can we expect from the game tonight?
Well, I'll go first because Bob didn't go first, but I'll make a prediction: Piqua 28 and Fairborn 7.
Ooh, Fairborn's going to get on the board?
That's the way it looks to me. You picked somebody to beat Springfield. So
Centerville to beat Springfield
I think
tonight.
my prediction
2
is
milkshakes on the line.
according to yours.
I think Fairborn may be a little better football team than we realize. They play a lot. I think the thing that'll hurt them tonight, warm temperatures. It's a little warm out here in the sun.
Yeah.
Of course, that'll cool down a little bit as we get darkness. But they play a lot of people both ways. And when you play people both ways at a high level in high school, people are going to wear out.
Yeah.
And I think Piqua will wear Fairborn down. I think our running game, our offensive line will dominate the line of scrimmage. I think our running game will continue to be at a high level. I think we'll put some points on the board. I'll even take one more touchdown to Wayne. I'll make it 35-7.
I'll take 35-7, but I will take it with the running clock in the second half, and then the running clock stops because Fairborn gets on the board late. I really think that if Piqua's defense plays as good as what it has, they've had to battle some field position issues with kickoffs and things like that. The kickoffs going out of bounds, giving up, the penalty. The other opposing team starts on the 40-yard line or greater, going into Indian territory. I really think that if this defense and this Piqua team can finally find a way to win the field position battle, which we haven't been able to do yet this season, that this defense will have another shutout tonight. If Fairborn has to go 70, 80 yards to try to get points on the board, they're going to be in trouble tonight.
Well, Fairborn had 270 yards last week against Beaver Creek.
It's not going to happen against our defense. No. I don't think so.
But I'm just telling you, potentially, they have the ability to move the football.
Yeah.
They came out and they scored, I think, 2 touchdowns in the first quarter.
They were up, and they scored all 19 in the first.
Yeah, and then it kind of dropped out on them.
When I did my starting lineup for Fairborn, did you notice how many sophomores and juniors?
They're
a pretty young ball club.
Yeah.
We're a pretty young ball club, too, I would have to say. But, I really think tonight, Indians pick up that 4th or 3rd win of the season going into Trotwood next week. And depending on how they play tonight and depending on who shows up next week at Trotwood, Piqua could be coming back or going into the Sydney game 4-1.
Yeah, one other thing, AJ, I want to say, injuries. Piqua has to avoid injuries. You can't go into the meat of your schedule with some people hurt.
Yeah.
And now we're getting into the meat of the schedule. So, injuries are a bugaboo for anybody, especially maybe a high school team that's not real deep.
Bob, that might be one of the keys to both this ball game. Injuries could be the key to the whole season.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've been fortunate so far. We still got a long way to go.
I agree with you guys. Well, that's all the time we have tonight for the Indian Nation Station pregame show right here at Perk Field. The next time we'll be on the air will be homecoming October the 5th for the Indians as the Greenville Green Wave come into town. Stay tuned for the game coming up next right here on the Indian Nation Station, Piqua Channel 5, your home for Piqua Athletics. For Mr. Bachman and Bob Luby, I'm AJ Ganger saying good night and go Indians.